Have you ever just looked at the world and wondered why some countries seem to get everything right, building wealth, creating opportunities, while others just seem stuck? It's a massive question, right? Well, today we're going to unpack the actual blueprint for what makes a nation truly thrive in the long run.
All right, so let's get right into it. What is the secret sauce? Is it having a ton of natural resources, a powerful military, maybe a certain kind of culture? You hear all these different theories, but the real answer isn't just one single thing. It's actually more like a fascinating, complex machine, and we're about to look under the hood. And here's the thing, it's not some magic bullet. A lot of people think they have the simple answer, but they're usually only looking at the very first step of a much bigger process. So here's the crucial point. Having a stable economy, keeping inflation in check, managing debt, is absolutely essential. You have to have it. It's the foundation you build everything on. But that's all it is, a foundation. Real, lasting prosperity comes from what you build on top of it. So let's look at the first block. Okay, so first you have to think of the world as this giant marketplace. It's not just companies like Apple and Samsung competing. Entire countries are in a race to attract investment, sell their goods, and create value. This whole idea is what we call national competitiveness. So what does competitiveness actually mean for a country? Well, it's all about creating the perfect environment, the right conditions, so that its businesses can go out and win on the world stage. It's about a government stacking the deck in favor of its own companies. And every country plays this game differently. Take Germany, for example. It doesn't compete by having the lowest wages. No way. It competes on the incredible quality and efficiency of its labor and its top-notch infrastructure. Now, on the other hand, you have China, which for decades built its competitive edge on a combination of low-cost labor and super-efficient logistics. It's all about playing to your strengths. So governments have these four main levers they can pull to tweak their country's competitiveness. They can influence their currency's value, making exports cheaper or more expensive. They can invest in better roads and ports. They can shape labor costs. And of course, they can set tax policies to attract investment. It's a constant balancing act. But here's the key. All of those levers, currency, taxes, all of it, they're just tools. They're all trying to influence something much, much deeper. And as the economist Paul Krugman famously said, there's one thing that in the long run is almost everything, and that brings us to the true engine of prosperity. And that engine is productivity. Now, this isn't about just working harder or longer hours. Not at all. It's about working smarter. It's the art of creating more economic value from the people and the resources you already have. At its very core, productivity is a pretty simple ratio. It's the total output of a country, all the goods and services it creates, divided by all the inputs used to make it. The labor, the machines, the land. Basically, it's a measure of how much bang you're getting for your buck. I mean, sure, a country can grow its economy just by throwing more resources at the problem. You can get more people working, build more factories, find more oil. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Eventually, you run out. Those resources are finite. You can't just add more workers or more land forever. That path has a hard ceiling. So if you want that real, sustained, long-term growth, the kind that truly raises a country's standard of living for generations, there's only one way to do it. You have to increase productivity. It's all about innovation, new technology, and better efficiency. It's figuring out how to make two cars using the same amount of steel and labor that used to make just one. Economists have a name for this magic ingredient, total factor productivity, or TFP. So picture a country's economy growing. Some of that growth is easy to explain. You added more workers, you built more machines. But there's almost always some growth left over that you can't explain by just adding more stuff. That leftover bit, that's TFP. That's the growth that comes from better ideas, smarter ways of organizing, and new technology. It's the measure of how smart an economy is. So how do you boost it? Well, there's a whole playbook. You give workers better tools and machines. You invest a ton in education and job training. You create an environment where new technologies are born and spread like wildfire. You make it easy for entrepreneurs to start new businesses. And you help your industry scale up and move into more complex, high-value work. But this whole economic engine, this productivity machine, it doesn't just run on its own. It needs a driver. It needs an architect. And that's where national leadership and a real strategy come into play. This is the human element that guides the entire process. And a successful leader in this game has three really big jobs. First, they have to paint a super clear picture of the future. We're talking concrete goals the whole country can see. Second, they have to rally everybody, from CEOs to factory workers, to get behind that vision. And third, and this might be the most important part, they have to build a system that keeps things moving forward long after they've left office. And when it comes to stability, there are two very different ways to get there. One way relies on the sheer force of will of a single, powerful leader. But that's fragile, right? What happens when they're gone? The other path, the one that lasts, is building stability into the system itself, with strong rules and a feeling that everyone is sharing in the benefits of growth. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most foundational piece of this whole puzzle. We're talking about the blueprint itself, the institutions, the formal and informal rules of the game that govern an entire society.
Think of institutions as the operating system for a country. Things like knowing your property is safe, having a legal system you can trust, and clear, transparent regulations. When you have these things, you create a stable playing field where people feel safe enough to invest their money and their energy for the long haul because they trust the rules of a game aren't going to change on them overnight. The World Bank actually measures this stuff using 6 key pillars of good governance. And you can see how they're split between the economic side, things like rule of law and regulatory quality, and the political and social side, like political stability and controlling corruption. A country's success really depends on getting all of these right. They all have to work together.
Okay, so let's put all of these pieces together. Competitiveness, productivity, leadership, and at the very bottom of it all, strong institutions. The impact of getting this formula right or wrong isn't just a theory. It's the story of the global economy for the last 50 years. And just look at this. The contrast here is absolutely staggering. This chart shows that TFP growth, our magic ingredient of innovation and efficiency. Between the early 80s and the late 2000s, you see Asian economies posting really strong positive growth. At the exact same time, major economies in Latin America were flat or even went backwards. That's a huge life-altering divergence. So why? What happened? Well, it's not a coincidence. That massive economic gap mirrors an institutional one almost perfectly. When you look at the governance scores, countries like Singapore are consistently at the top of the charts for rule of law, government effectiveness, and low corruption. Their strong institutions created that predictable foundation that allowed for a productivity boom. And all of this leads us to one final massive question. The blueprint seems clear, right? Build a stable economy, focus on competitiveness, relentlessly chase productivity, and anchor it all with strong, trustworthy institutions. But if we know the recipe, why is it so incredibly hard for so many countries to actually follow it? Well, that's the billion-person question, isn't it? And the answer is tangled up in a complex mix of history, politics, and culture.